I found out how the parable works. That's right, I found out how the parable works. The Stanley Parable, the game that has been causing me insanity for the entirety of the past few years. So why not start off the new year with a new theory? So let's move our focus to Stanley. You know him, you love him, but Stanley holds a very tragic tale. One of corporate greed, surveillance, and corruption. Stanley was a family man. He had a wife and children he read stories to every night. Stanley was just a boring fellow with an ordinary life.
Stanley is quite a boring fellow. He has a job that demands nothing of him, and every button that he pushes is a reminder of the inconsequential nature of his existence.
From this ending, we get a pretty good idea of what his life was before the office. Now, I've gone into a little bit more depth about this in a previous video. However, this is a good example of the mind control room, or rather its effects on the employees.
But here was the proof, the heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place.
Now you might be asking, how does this have anything to do with the parable itself? Well, you see, that mind control room holds a lot more lore than we think it does. Looking back at the employee protocol, we get a lot of information that all seems to lead towards the mind control room. Like the lockdown procedure to the boss's office, and even this corridor that closes when you get close to it during the countdown ending. However, there is one thing that stuck out to me. And no, it is not the 432 prize pool. If an employee somehow manages to leave the office during work hours, you must initiate a lockdown procedure for that section immediately without delay. This will create a temporary loop in the system. Where have we heard this before?
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss. Admitting he had left his post during work hours, he might be fired for that.
You know what's really interesting about that ending? You're walking around in a loop. The rooms repeat. If that's not a hint that that's what happened to Stanley to get him in this position, I don't know what is. Especially in his note page, he even says it just starts over again. Even the monitors themselves tell us we are stuck in a loop with this Easter egg. However, there is more to this. You think I'm done? No, there is another piece to the puzzle. If an employee leaves the office during work hours and system loop has failed, you must terminate. There is many cases of Stanley getting terminated. What I want to focus on is system loop has failed, because we get a good example of what happens in the confusion ending.
I don't want the game to keep restarting. I don't want to forget what's going on. I don't want to be trapped like this. I won't restart the game. I won't do it. I won't do it. I won't do it. And the timer stopped? Does that mean... did we do it? Did we break the...
Now, the thing that I find interesting is this last bit.
Well, in the meantime, if you...
I've heard this audio before. That audio exists in another location of the game.
I barely know where to start. What's that? I need to know where you're...
There is no denying that is the same sound. And do you know what that means? Narrator is the system, or at least the sound system. And I've gone over this before, from how he glitches out, especially when he becomes a little too aware. How his voice breaks, just like Stanley's mannequin wife. Narrator can reset the game, just like it says in the observation. The confusion ending, where he refuses to continue the cycle, is when something else takes control and forces a reset. Just like it's stated on the papers. It's almost as if the narrator is the mind control machine itself. Now, before everybody screams at me, I need to tell you why. Remember in a previous theory where I talked about how narrator has multiple Stanleys? In the employee audio from the menu, we have an employee talking about the boss's keypad.
I was going up to the boss's office I did my quarterly reports, and I saw he has this keypad at the back of his room, and I was thinking, what is that keypad for, And so I went up to it, and it wasn't in, and I thought for a second about typing in some numbers.
And then we have another one talking about some kind of ending. And we know he narrates Mariella in the dream ending.
This is the story of a woman named Mariella.
I could go on and on, but needless to say, all the employees have common ground with the narrator. So the fact that they also have common ground with the mind control room is very interesting. However, there's something I have neglected to tell you. Something I've noticed.
Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? But in his mind, in his mind he can go on fantastic adventures. But his brain had long ceased to function. But I'm just a tape recording. It was all just in Stanley's head.
There is so many little nods and little hints to Stanley's head, mind, and brain, which screams a hint towards the mind control facility, further hinting we are trapped. So is the narrator. The narrator wants to leave too. The curator even explains
how they wish to destroy one another, how they wish to control one another, how they both wish to be free. Can you see? Can you see how much they need one another?
If the narrator is the mind control system, it would make sense. The printer, for example, also wishes to leave. So another sentient object wishing to be destroyed or be freed would make sense. Now let's go to, do you see how much they need one another? The escape pod ending makes it very clear Stanley and the narrator must be both present for it to work. The real person ending shows us the effect if narrator is not around with Stanley. Things slowly start to break. If Stanley is not there, things get broken. So if Stanley and the narrator want to leave, they have to come to an agreement. They just haven't found it yet. The ending that was closest to their escape was the confusion ending. Until the machine took over. So until they can figure out how to stop that sensor, they should be able to be freed. Now there's one question that remains. Why did Stanley leave during work hours in the first place? The answer's pretty clear. The game itself has been giving us many different hints. And it all comes back to Stanley's family. I'm not sure if you noticed this, but this game talks a lot about family. Or at least rather haunts Stanley about family themes. Let me roll the clip.
It's a very meaningful game, all about the desperation and tedium of endlessly confronting the demands of family life. I want my apartment, and my wife, and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. Someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. Someone you've forgotten about. Please, stop trying to make every decision by yourself. Now, I'm not asking for me, I'm asking for her. This is it, Stanley. Your chance to redeem yourself, to put your work aside, to let her back into your life. She's been waiting. Gotcha! Oh, come on. Did you actually think you had a loving wife who'd want to commit their life to you? I'm trying to make a point.
Hi, Stanley. Just wanted to leave you a message to let you know there's a few things I need you to pick up on your way home from work today. We need...
Hello, and thank you for playing the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. As you may know, the Stanley Parable was a video game released in 2013 on home computers.
What this is telling me is that Stanley was so locked into his job and so keen on pushing those damn buttons, it slowly drifted him away from his family. unable to balance work and family life. But when Stanley realized, it was almost too late, as now he's trapped in the parable, haunting him and his past mistakes.
You spend far too much time with your computer. It's not healthy.
It's my life.
That's so very, very sad.
Stanley wants to redeem himself. He deeply misses the life he has. Or rather, once had. But with that said, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Bye-bye! Why did I sound like that?